Okay, time for a new video, and whether you are somebody new to my channel or you are returning to my channel to watch this video, it is greatly appreciated. As always, I'm filming this video in one go, so if I stumble over my words moving forwards, apologies about that, and also if the quality of this video is fairly poor as well, if there's any lag, anything like that at all, sadly it cannot be helped, and hopefully it is not too much of an issue for you. This is yet another Eurovision 2023 related video here on my channel, and this is the second of 4 videos that I'm hoping to get uploaded onto my channel within the space of about a week or so. The first video was uploaded yesterday at the time of recording this video you're watching now, and in that first video I spoke about my day in Liverpool because I was there on Saturday the 13th of May, just down the road from where the action was actually taking place. I was with my friend Peter and we were in the Eurovision Village on the pier head to watch a grand final screening on one of the big screens that they had set up there. So if you're interested in hearing specifically about my day in Liverpool, you can check that video out. This video is the annual tradition now in which I go off on a long rambling review of the entire contest, talking about each country one by one and specifically the results. Video number 3, which I'm hoping to get uploaded onto my channel very soon, is the 10-minute long video of me in the Eurovision Village last week reacting to the public half of the results as they came in. And video number 4 will be all of the other footage from that day in Liverpool, excluding the bit in which I reacted to the public half of the results as they came in. So this is video 2 of 4, and I'm telling you now, I could be waffling a lot here, just bear with me. So, before I get into the actual songs and the shows and all of that business, a few newspaper cuttings, ladies and gentlemen, and this is an interesting one. On the front page of the newspaper recently. How about this? I'm sure you've all got thoughts on this one. You won't be able to see it very clearly, but look what it says right here. The Great Eurovision Robbery. Talking about Finland's entry. Yes, indeed. And then there is an article in here, which I just have to find again. I might make a whole video going through newspaper cuttings from here in Britain to do with Eurovision, if you're at all interested. Unhappy Finns lead calls for a Eurovision voting overhaul. Then there's 2 little segments here. Nick Duffy says the discontent inside the Liverpool arena was audible to everyone as the jury vote rolled in. Juries are prone to rewarding the safe and serious over the wild and wacky. And then the next little bit here says scrapping the jury vote would be a mistake because there would always be that lingering suspicion points weren't based on talent and performance. I don't mind that the result was controversial. With high scores in both votes, Lorien played the Eurovision game and won. Interesting. There's also this little bit here from The Guardian, ranking Eurovision winners. An interesting top 10 here, including Poupée de Cire, Poupée de Son for Luxembourg at number 2, 1944 above Euphoria, which I don't think is the case, but there we are. Danse Visa for Denmark, 1963 at number 5, and Ding a Dong for the Netherlands, above Rise Like a Phoenix and Hard Rock Hallelujah. Very interesting. And then also, this is from, I think, The Guardian as well. No, this is from last week's edition of The Times, the 10 greatest Eurovision moments, which includes Verka Serduchka, the Russian Grannies, Dana International, Cliff Richard losing to Spain, and also Dadi Gagna Magnet in 2020. But number 1, would you believe it, as was the case with this list as well of great Eurovision winners, ABBA number 1. So there we go. Is that really the greatest Eurovision moment? ABBA winning? I don't know. What very few people talk about is how ABBA could have actually represented Sweden the year before, and may never have gone to Eurovision 1974 in the first place. But there we are. Anyway, let's talk about this year's competition. Semi-final 1 took place on Tuesday the 9th of May at 8 p.m. GMT, or BST as it says here. 15 countries were involved. They all voted alongside France, Germany and Italy, and the rather mysterious rest of the world vote, which was never really mentioned, never really explained, and seemed to be brushed under the carpet, to be completely honest with you. Whether it remains or not, We will soon find out, of course. I imagine next year in Sweden, I wouldn't be surprised if they tinker with the format completely again. But there we are. So, let's go through the countries that did not qualify first, and I'll use my official program book once again to highlight the acts in question. So let me just throw that down there. We begin with Song 2, Malta. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. It's the same old story. Something I will say about this year in general, ladies and gentlemen. How utterly predictable. Sweden winning, Germany last, the UK struggling, Malta not qualifying, Ireland not qualifying, Latvia not qualifying, and San Marino not qualifying, and Georgia not qualifying. So many of the things that we are used to with Eurovision happened yet again. So in a way, now that the dust has settled, maybe we can agree that this was a fairly predictable contest, certainly in terms of some nations' results. But Malta, yes, could we blame the running order here? Maybe. Was this a case of a song that a lot of people generally enjoyed, but nobody was really going to vote for? I don't know. 3 points, though, is so poor. Those 3 points came from Israel and the rest of the world. This was, of course, the busker with Dance Our Own Party, and I liked this, and it seemed to me as though this song was getting a little bit more momentum at just the right time, just prior to last Tuesday, the first semi-final. I saw more and more people online, not that I was trawling through loads of social media comments, but I saw a few people say, you know, the rehearsals have been good, Malta's getting a bit more attention, this is a really fun song, this would be a breath of fresh air in the final, etc, etc. In the end, last place in that first semi-final. Oh dear me. What a shame. I thought the performance was pretty good, fairly similar to how it was at the national final, but elevated a touch. This sort of retro, classic, 1980s throwback style that they were going for, the purple colour scheme, the 8-bit graphics, the lead singer in the stripy sweater, which he then whipped off, and he had this more sparkly thing underneath, the cardboard cutouts of former Maltese representatives, the car, and so on. Yeah, it was fun. But ultimately, did this live long in the memory? I'm not sure it did. And it's the same old story, Malta struggling, for whatever reason, with the public. We've seen it for so many years in a row now, and I don't know how they can stop the rot. In retrospect, and I think I said this in a previous video too, this was arguably the best choice Malta could have sent, because Aidan was disqualified. It would have been him in Liverpool, I'm sure, had he not been controversially booted out of the Maltese selection. You had Brooke, you had Maxine Patch, you had Ryan, who actually was the spokesperson for Malta this year. They were fine songs, fine acts, but the busker arguably was the strongest choice in the end. So it's a real shame this didn't fare a bit better. But there we are. Malta, I suppose, doesn't really have a whole lot of voting pals, and sending a fine song doesn't always do it. It's all well and good having a song that a lot of people enjoy, but it has to be at that level where people are actually going to vote for it in big numbers. And because this was a 100% public semi-final, no jury vote, you know, I always felt Malta was probably going to suffer as a result of that. And that's exactly what happened. There they are in the programme book, the busker, Song 2, a likeable song, likeable guys, but alas, not to be this year. I feel better in my sweater, got my stereo, I'll play you songs you know, etc. Anyway, I'm really rambling already. Let's talk about the next song that didn't qualify, which was Song 4, Latvia. Another opportunity goes begging. This was Sudden Lights, you can just about see them I think, with Aya. Lovely song, very sweet. Aya sort of means shush. And this is a very lullaby type track. I loved the sort of autumnal, cosy vibe to the staging. The vocals were good, but again, did this really stand out enough? I'm not sure it did. 11th place, 34 points. Only a few points behind Serbia, who went through in 10th place. Interestingly, the highest mark Sudden Lights got was 8 from the rest of the world, which is very interesting. Yeah, really lovely song, and over the years, we've had a few somewhat silly entries from Latvia, but this one was a lot more serious, a lot more gentle, and had the juries been involved, given that they weren't really keen on Serbia's track in the final, and Portugal didn't really get a high mark from the juries either in the final, and Croatia, Latvia may well have qualified had the juries been there last Tuesday. So it's a bit of a slap in the face, to be honest with you. But I don't think Latvia should feel too disheartened by this. Yes, it's another year in which they don't make the final, but this was a pretty credible entry. And something to look forwards to, the last time Latvia were in a Eurovision final was in Sweden. And lo and behold, next year's contest is in Sweden again. So high hopes for next year. Next up is Ireland. Well, there needs to be a massive overhaul in Ireland in terms of the way they approach the contest, because for a few years now they've just been stinking the place out. This song, Wild Youth, We Are One, okay, not bad. Very generic, feel like I've heard it a million times before. The staging was much better at Eurovision than how it was at the Irish national final, which to be honest isn't much of a national final. It takes place in a studio and is part of a long-running chat show, so it's not much of anything really, but they gave this a right good go. Vocally, it could have been stronger. The lead singer was sort of letting the backing track do a lot of the work at certain points. The crowd seemed fired up for it, and I think this was gaining a bit more momentum at just the right time. But I never, ever saw this song as a qualifier, and I would have been very shocked had Ireland made the cut this year. This finished 12th with 10 points. Now, for a song to finish in that position with that few points seems really, really odd. I mean, it was a very, very sort of lopsided semi-final. Looking at the actual specific results, Ireland received a high mark of 3 from Norway and Malta. Yes, indeed. And I don't know how accurate this is because I haven't really been paying attention, but I think the lead singer was very critical on social media after the semi-final, saying something about how Ireland never do that well, or nobody really likes them, or whatever it is. I don't really know. I've not looked into it. But next year, there needs to be a big overhaul, because now Sweden has tied Ireland's record of 7 victories and will be gunning for an 8th next year. That has to be their drive moving forwards. Ireland need to up it. They really, really do. There's some great musicians over there, and what I'd like to hear is a song in Irish. I'm just saying, well, I've been saying it for a long time. We need a song in Irish. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the picture of Wild Youth in the programme book. There you are. Anyway, let's move on. My God, we have the Netherlands next. What a shame. Absolutely one of my favourite songs of the year. I really love the lyrics of this one. It really does hit home. I'm talking about the Netherlands, and it's not them, of course. It's Azerbaijan. I've lost the plot. Song 12 is Azerbaijan. This was Tural Turan X with Tell Me More. Fair play to Azerbaijan for trying something different this year and not just going down the get a group of Scandinavian songwriters to produce something for us. This was sweet. I liked the colours. I liked the outfits, very vintage. I liked how relaxing it was. But coming straight after Sweden, right before the Czech Republic, this just fell a bit flat. And this never really had any momentum whatsoever coming into the contest, so it was always going to struggle. This finished 14th with 4 points, with those 4 points coming from 3 different countries. Latvia gave them 2, Croatia 1, and Israel 1. And here is the picture of the 2 brothers in the programme book. Credit where credit's due, it really wasn't that bad, but it really was very forgettable stuff. Now, I shall move on to the Netherlands. Yes, I just love this song. This is Mia Nicolai and Dion Cooper with Burning Daylight, co-written with Duncan Lawrence, the last Dutch winner, of course. We all know the issues that they had prior to arriving in Liverpool. The pre-party performances weren't great. The vocals were a bit dodgy. So they changed it and upped the key of this song. In terms of the staging, the camera was just sort of panning around them. They were in these black outfits. There wasn't really much happening on the backdrop. Like with Ireland, they gave it a good go, but it wasn't enough. As soon as the performance was over last week, I thought this was really nice. But just who's going to vote for this in big numbers? Nobody really. And the damage was done before Eurovision, you could argue, and they didn't really change it or elevate it enough. It was too little too late. But I still really like this song, think the lyrics are fabulous, and this song finished in 13th place with 7 poor points, a high mark of 2 from Moldova and Sweden. There's talk next year of the Netherlands going back to a national final, which has disaster written all over it as far as I'm concerned, but then again times have changed, and I'm sure a national final format would be a lot stronger than what we had in the past from the Netherlands. But I'd like to see a song that feels very, very different. Maybe it's worth taking a bit of a risk next year in Sweden, maybe a rock song, something like that. I'd love to see it, I'd love to hear it. Maybe a song that's back in the Dutch language. We had one last year, but not this year. I don't know, there's a lot of things to think about. And now that the dust has settled, I would say a lot of Eurovision fans are just disappointed in the Netherlands this year, because they sent something that wasn't really pushing the boundaries. It wasn't really something brand new from this country. It was more of the same. I think there was a bit of an apathy towards the Dutch track. I still really like it though. Absolutely one of my favourites of the year, and I was very sad this didn't qualify, but in all honesty I'm not the slightest bit surprised. We move on to semi-final 2, which took place last Thursday, the 11th of May. 16 countries involved, they all voted, plus Spain, Ukraine and the UK, and that quite hush-hush rest of the world vote. Song 1, Denmark, didn't qualify. Ooh, dear me. Another year in which Denmark don't make the cut. And they're in a bit of a bad run at the moment, aren't they? This was Riley from the Faroe Islands with Breaking My Heart. He co-wrote this. Social media star, it says here. Big following on TikTok. Opening the show is never easy. I thought this would do a lot better though. I did predict Denmark to not qualify, but after seeing the performance and knowing that a lot of people really didn't mind this track, I thought my prediction was going to be a load of trash. But no, he didn't go through, and only one country gave him any votes. All 6 came from Iceland, and he finished in 14th place. So this is absolutely one of the worst results Denmark has ever had. I can't believe it. Vocally, he was never bang on the money. At DMGP, not brilliant. Pre-parties, better. Eurovision, better. But still not quite doing the business for me. Then again, I'm not sure vocals really matter that much at the contest at all. In terms of the staging, it was different from DMGP, and I knew it was going to be because I think he said it was going to be anyway. He had this revolving wall structure, which actually didn't add that much to the performance at all. And then you had this sort of green backdrop as well. And he was wearing this sparkly pink jacket and trousers. He looked pretty good. He looked quite comfortable on stage. There was this moment at the start where he scribbled over the camera, and I thought, this is taking a bit of a wild, you know, surely just rip it off, mate. Yeah, and there were some weird camera angles, I would say, in this performance as well. But anyway, he didn't qualify, which is a bit of a shame, and Denmark have already said that they're not really going to change anything in terms of next year's selection process. But if I was Danish, I'd be getting really pretty concerned, because this is a country that we are now getting used to being a non-qualifier. We then move on to song 3, Romania. I feel bad about this. Theodor Andre with DGT Off and On. Great singer, poor song. That was the problem. The song was not good enough, and the staging wasn't brilliant either. It was a little bit on the shambolic side, and I know that his broadcaster didn't really support him, which is terrible, and Romania might well withdraw next year, and if that happens, they might not be back for a while. And it's strange, because back in the sort of late 2000s, this was a country that we usually expected to do very, very well, but now they are in dire straits. The performance, I just wasn't really a fan of it. The national final performance, certainly, I didn't think was up to scratch. At Eurovision it was a bit better, started off in acoustic fashion, and that was fine if the whole song had been in that acoustic style. I wouldn't have minded it. Yes, it would have been dead in the water, absolutely, but I didn't mind that, and then the sort of more rockish vibe kicked in. He had these figures on the stage floor that were sort of in the buff. Didn't really know what that was all about. This lava look on the backdrop as well at one point. I think it was his girlfriend too. It was all odd. The imagery didn't really match the song at all, and he was alone on stage, giving it a right good go, but the crowd was dead for this one, and as such, 0 points? Not really a surprise, I have to say. Really disappointing. This was not the strongest song, in my opinion, in the Romanian selection. Anyway, Theodor, great singer, disappointing song, and I know some people had an issue with the lyrics as well. We move on to Song 7, Iceland. Oh, what a shame. I was really behind this one. Diljá Pettersdottir with Power. A pretty simple track, not doing anything groundbreaking, but had a good beat, had an energy to it. Diljá was fantastic at Sungakepnin, and at Eurovision it was exactly the same, really. She was, moving across the stage, looking great, vocally supreme. She was really, really going for this. But I suppose in the end it was just lacking that little bit of spark to really see it through to the final. She finished 11th, which isn't bad, with 44 points. And she received 12 from Denmark, 7 from San Marino. They were up for a good time at the very least. She was wearing this silvery outfit, and like I said, she was moving about the stage with a lot of confidence, really belting this tune out. What a shame. What a shame. But again, like with Latvia in semi-final 1, I don't think Iceland in this instance should feel too disheartened, because they were represented by somebody really good with a really smashing voice. The song wasn't bad, and it only just missed out on qualifying, really. So, next year, time to bounce back. We move on to Greece. 16-year-old Viktor Vernikos, part Danish. Denmark gave him nothing. And he finished in 13th place with 14 points. I just spat over my screen, apologies. This song, I don't mind it, but it doesn't really have much of a hook, I would say. It doesn't really have much to grip onto. It just sort of moves along, and then once it's over, you've sort of forgotten how it went. But Greece received 12 from Cyprus, because of course they did, and 2 from Armenia. He was in this very bland outfit, jumping up and down. There was a smoke machine. Not really much happening in terms of imagery. I felt this could have been elevated a hell of a lot more. It all struck me as fairly plain and fairly safe. And I just didn't really see many people going for this in big numbers, which is exactly what happened. And to go from Die Together to this song, that's a whopper of a downgrade in my opinion. We then move on to song 11, which was Georgia. Yet another year in which Georgia don't make the cut. But again, they can't feel too disheartened, because this was a more serious entry from the Georgians after Circus Mercus and 1 or 2 other songs in the past that felt a little bit subpar. This was really pretty decent stuff. I really liked the staging with the 2 LED screens that have been brought forwards for this one. The smoke, the lights, Iru sounding great, looking fabulous, really belting this song out. Former junior Eurovision winner, of course. Lyrically, all over the place, but we can move past that. This was a job well done, and I like the song more now than I did a couple of weeks ago, absolutely. Still not one of my big favourites, but credit where credit's due. This was a really, really good performance, and I was really shocked she didn't go through, but there we are. 33 points, not really close in the end. 12th place, a high mark of 12 from the Armenian public, which is not really a shock. It was very dramatic, but I suppose once it was over, people were in the mood for something a little bit more jaunty, I suppose. I mean, Poland did very well, Austria did very well, Australia did very well. Maybe Georgia felt a bit too dark for some viewers. I don't really know. What we do know is that Georgia didn't qualify. Neither did San Marino, song 12. Pete Jacks, Like an Animal. My God, the elevation here. From originally performing this song in a small room to then in a room in San Marino with a bit more of an audience to Eurovision. What a glow up. They really elevated this. I thought it was a job well done. I liked the lighting. I liked the energy. I thought the vocals weren't bad. But as we all expected, where were the votes going to come from? Who was going to vote for this in big enough numbers? The answer, nobody. San Marino finished with 0 points. But look, fair play to San Marino, because they've got this long-winded national final, but it's probably the best way to go about selecting somebody for a country like that. So they may as well keep this format, keep plugging away, and hopefully one year they are going to have a really brilliant entry that a lot of people are really on board with. Much more than Adrenalina from a few years ago. I'm talking about something that really could challenge for a top half finish. That would be great to see. Anyway, that is it for semi-final 2. Let's now talk about the final. And 26 nations were involved last Saturday. They all voted, as did the countries that didn't qualify from the 2 semi-finals. and the rest of the world voted too, plus the juries were back. So let's go from bottom to top, and we begin with Germany. I realise I haven't been showing the photos, but there we are. Germany, last again. They are in such a dreadful situation when it comes to Eurovision, although they have announced that they will be back next year, which is great. This was Lord of the Lost, Blood and Glitter. The national final performance was fine, but at Eurovision they just turned that dial up to 11. We had flames, we had a bit of pyro, I think, real energy. I thought this was a really, really good performance, and it really went down well in the Eurovision village, I can tell you that much. Fair play to Germany for trying something a bit different. It was necessary. Last year's German entry was a bit of a snooze fest, with all due respect. This absolutely grabbed onto your attention from the word go. Yeah, what a really smashing performance this was. A real shame that professional juries couldn't really appreciate this style of music, this sort of metal style. That's a bit of a disappointment, I have to say. The public also didn't really go big for this either. And I think I said in a video a few weeks ago, would we really be surprised if Germany finished last again? Oh man, I suppose once you've got that grand final lineup and you look at all of the other songs and you think to yourself, okay, who's going to struggle this year? Germany was probably on that little list for a lot of people. Last with the juries 3 points, and 24th with the public 15 points. Last with 18 points in total. As for the juries, Germany received a high mark of 2 from Iceland, and with the public, Germany received a high mark of 6 from Austria, next door neighbours. This was very striking, it was very aggressive, but it was a real spectacle, and I feel so sad because Germany did not deserve to finish last this year. But what can they do next year to avoid another disappointing outcome? We then talk about the UK. Oh boy. May Muller, what a great representative. So enthusiastic, so likeable, really fired up for it. She did loads of interviews, so nice, so down to earth. What a shame about the result. Any momentum this song had disappeared very quickly. As soon as that rehearsal clip was released, everybody started saying she's done for, bottom 5, 0 points, and I thought that's a bit harsh. What was the problem on the night? Well, vocally it wasn't strong enough, I have to say. Whether that was because May's voice just wasn't powerful enough, I don't know, or whether it was because her backing vocalists weren't strong enough, or the whole mix of the song wasn't really working. It's hard to really say. Visually this was fine, it was very playful, very cheeky, bit of choreography, May looking like $1 million as well. But the energy wasn't quite as high as I wanted it to be. Spaceman really packed a bit of a punch, whereas this, last in the running order, just felt a bit flat, I have to say. Big cheers in the Eurovision village, but then again, that's because the contest was in the UK and we were rooting for our own act. But you have to say maybe the running order did play a part in this song's downfall, because Croatia were on just before us, Israel wasn't that far behind either. People had made their mind up long before May took to the stage. But she did a pretty good job, and I think we can feel very proud of her achievements. 22nd with the juries, 25th with the public, 24 points in total, a high mark of 4 from a couple of juries, and 4 votes from the Maltese public, 5 votes from the Ukrainian public, and that was it. There we are. 25 years of age apparently, and we wish her well moving forwards. Next year we must keep this format going. We must keep working the BBC and Tap Music. That collaboration must stay in place, because otherwise we are going to go straight back to the dark days, and that is something no British Eurovision fan wants to see. Next up is Serbia. Luke Black, Samomisa Spava, 30 points, 24th place. 23rd with the juries. I had a feeling he wouldn't do well with them, but the public, I thought he'd do a bit better. He finished 21st with them, 16 points. Taking a look here, he received a high mark of 4 from the Portuguese and Croatian juries, and with the public he received a high mark of 7 from the Croatian public. In the first semi-final he finished 10th with 37 points, receiving a high mark of 10 from Croatia. This was very moody, very dark, very mysterious, very ominous, very spooky, whatever other synonym you want to use. Great performer, a bit of a showman, looked pretty good on that Eurovision stage, starting off in that sort of white podium, and then he had guys with him on stage wearing backpacks and there was smoke everywhere and flashing lights. I suppose the juries just weren't keen on this sound, this very sort of dark tone to the song. I saw it coming. As for the public mark, that did surprise me a bit, but there we are. I suppose in the grand scheme of things, this didn't quite stand out enough. Maybe people didn't really like his vocal delivery. It is a sort of very whispery style of song. Anyway, you can analyse this as much as you like. Serbia finishing in the bottom 3 is a bit of a shame, but there we are. It says here, indie techno pop, so there you go. We then move on to Portugal. This was song 2 on the night, finished 23rd, Mimicat, Ai Curaçao. This had 59 points in the end, 18th with the juries, and 23rd with the public. A high mark of 8 from the a high mark of 10 from the Greek jury, so they were having a good time early on, and a high mark of 7 from the Swiss public. In the first semi-final, Mimicat went through in 9th place, receiving a high mark of 12 from the French and Swiss public. This was really good. I said it all along though, this needed to be visually a bit stronger. They weren't really using the LED screens, and so it was lacking in that department, but this was so fun, so jaunty, great singer, red outfits, bopping about on stage. I really, really liked this, and maybe the running order was a bit of a damaging blow, I don't know, but it was really enjoyable to watch and maybe deserved a bit more love. I have nothing else to say about it. Moving on, we have Albania. Well, same old story. Albania qualifying for the final and then finishing towards the bottom. That's exactly what happened this year as well. Albina and the Kelmendi family with Do Ye. I mean, they really staged this in a very powerful way. Fire. Great vocals. I think a lot of people would agree with me on that. Absolutely. And there was real power behind this performance. 76 points in the end. In the second semi-final, Albania qualified in 9th place with 83 points, receiving a high mark of 12 from the rest of the world and Slovenia. And in the final, Albania were 21st with the juries and, get this, 10th with the public. With the juries, Albania received a high mark of 8 from Azerbaijan, and from the public, a high mark of 12 from Switzerland, and I suppose that's because of the diaspora. Not one of my favourite songs of the year by any stretch of the imagination. Of course, we first heard this last year when Fik came around, so it's been out for a long time in the Albanian language. Really nice job, but ultimately didn't quite have the legs, if you see what I mean, to finish really high up on the scoreboard. But still, making the final is not bad. Then we have Slovenia. Well, this deserved more. Joker out Carpe Diem in the Slovene language, which is fantastic, and a welcome return to the final for Slovenia too. But they were right at the end of the running order. You had Israel, Croatia. It was a really odd batch of songs all bunched together. But this was a really good performance. I wasn't sure when I saw the rehearsal clip last week, but on the whole, this was really good. It felt like a Joker out concert and not Eurovision, which was fantastic. You had lots of red lights. You had these sort of vintage-looking outfits. Very charismatic, full of charisma, this performance. Finished 21st with 78 points. In the split results, 19th with the juries and 16th with the public. A high mark of 12 from the Serbian jury and a high mark of 12 from the Croatian public. And in semi-final 2, Slovenia finished 5th, which is their best result for years, receiving a high mark of 12 from 3 voting nations, including Spain. Spain's public thought this was the best song of semi-final 2, so there you go. Really, really nice. This sort of indie rock style deserved a bit more love. We then have Switzerland. Great that this made the cut. 92 points, 20th place for Watergun by Remo Forra. Great lyrics, one of my biggest growers of the year. Really wasn't sure how they were going to stage this, but they did it in a really good way with these sort of ribbons coming out from the waist, and then you had the pyros that were dropping down from the ceiling, and a really nice job that they did with the lights as well. Vocally very strong. In the first semi-final, he went through quite comfortably in 7th place, receiving a high mark of 8 from a couple of different countries. The only voters not to give him anything in the first semi-final was the rest of the world, interestingly enough. In the final, 14th with the jurors. I thought he might have done a bit better, but they preferred Estonia, you see. And with the public, he finished 18th. In terms of specifically, Switzerland received a high mark of 10 from the Finnish jury, and with the public, a high mark of... where am I looking here? A high mark of 8 from the Swedish televote. Very interesting indeed. Yeah, really, really solid performance. Not a disgrace whatsoever. Just another pretty successful result, just seeing Switzerland in the final once again. Then we have Poland. Well, you have to say this is one of the results of the year. She was on early. She did very well with the public in both the second semi-final and the final. And there was all this controversy about her being at Eurovision in the first place, but she's sort of having the last laugh. And I have to say, this was such an improvement on the national final. At the national final in Poland, this was sloppy stuff, and she sounded pretty poor. Last week, though, she sounded much better. How reliant she was on the backing vocals, I don't really know, but she was looking good, she looked confident. There was a very summery, tropical theme to the whole performance. There was pyros, there was a dance break, which didn't really add much at all, but maybe helped her in the long run. I don't really know. 19th place, 93 points in the semi-final. She finished third with 124 points, receiving a high mark of 12 from Ukraine and Lithuania. And in the final, she was 24th with the juries, but 8th with the public. How about that? People were just in the mood for a good time, I suppose, even though this was on early on. She received a high mark of 6 from the Ukrainian jury and a high mark of 12 from the Ukrainian public. Yeah, I really don't have anything else to say about this. It's absolutely one of my biggest growers of the year, but I sort of like the song anyway. And yes, maybe it's a bit cheap, and maybe it's not really doing anything groundbreaking, but it really wasn't that bad. In my opinion, it really wasn't. We move on to Moldova. I think people just forgot about this a little bit. The result isn't bad, but it's sort of as we were expecting. Pasha Parfeni with Soarele și Luna in the Romanian language, the sun and the moon. He was back for a second bite of the Eurovision cherry, having finished just outside the top 10 in 2012, I believe. Anyway, 96 points, 18th place. In the first semi-final, he finished in 5th place, so comfortably qualifying again, Moldova, which is nice to see. He had points from every country, including 12 from the Portuguese public and the Italian public, and in the final, Pasha was 20th with the juries, 9th with the public. He received a high mark of 7 from the Romanian jury and a high mark of 12 from the Romanian public and the Italian public. So how about that? The performance was fine, but as I said to my friend Peter on Saturday night in the Eurovision Village, this was actually a little bit forgettable, I have to say, and whether that was because of the running order or the bit of the song they showed in the recap, I don't really know, but there wasn't a great deal of buzz surrounding this song. But the performance was fine. It's a really bouncy tune. Certainly it sounded very loud, pumping out through the speakers in the Eurovision Village, and he's a great performer with a great voice in that sort of flowing outfit, swaying about. Not a bad job whatsoever. My voice is starting to hurt. We now move on to Spain. Oh boy, what happened here? 17th place for this, 100 points. Finished last with the public, 5 points. Now it's interesting because my friend Peter hated this song. And given that this was last with the public, maybe a lot of other people felt the same way as him. They just couldn't get into this. They found it to be a shouty, wailing sort of track. I don't really know. I mean, yes, it's not the most accessible track. It's quite traditionally Spanish in a way, this flamenco sound. But clearly a lot of people just thought that it was a lot of noise. I don't really know. My mother didn't like the song either when I played a clip of it to her the other week. The juries, though, were a bit more appreciative. 9th place at 95 points. People have been saying online, scrap the juries altogether. But that would have meant Spain finished last this year, which would have been utterly, utterly outrageous. If we take a look at the results, a high mark of 10 from the Portuguese jury, and Spain's 5 public points came from the rest of the world and 3 from Portugal. I don't really know what happened here. The performance wasn't that different from how it was at Benidorm Fest. Blanca is so likeable, one of the best vocalists this year, very dramatic, very powerful. So I'm a bit baffled as to why it didn't do a bit better. But there we are. Who saw last place with the public coming for Spain this year? Because I certainly did not. And it's back to the drawing board again next year. They're keeping Benidorm Fest, which I think is absolutely the right thing to do, and I'm sure they'll bounce back. Then we have France. Do you know what this reminds me of? Bilal Hassani. He was one of the favourites to win on the day of the final in 2019. He finished mid-table. Same thing happened here with Lazare and Evidemment. This was on fairly early. I thought the juries would have liked this a lot more, but she finished 16th with them and then 14th with the public, so 104 points in total. She was elevated off from the stage floor, and then she was atop this plinth which lit up, and you had the pyros and the French flag made up on the lights, and she looked really good and sounded pretty good. But ultimately, did this really leave enough of an impression? Clearly not. If we take a look at the specifics of the results, France received a high mark of 10 from the Swedish jury and a high mark of 10 from the Armenian public. Well, there we go. This just fell a bit flat. It was a bit of a flop, which does surprise me, but there we are. And hopefully France will bounce back next year, just like Spain will. Then we have Austria. Well, I think this was damaged by being on first. This finished with 120 points, 15th place, actually doing much better with the juries, 8th. The public had this in 22nd place. So clearly, all of the excitement and buzz that there was surrounding Who the Hell is Edgar by Taya and Selena faded very quickly. In the second semi-final, they did finish second, receiving a high mark of 12 from the Australian public. In the final, the juries gave Austria plenty of points, 12 points from Belgium. As for the public, a high mark of 7 from Australia. Yeah, it was a good performance. But a lot of people, I think, felt quite disappointed about it. I don't really know why. Maybe it needed something else visually for viewers. I don't really know at all. The vocals were okay, I suppose. Outfits were fine. It's a very catchy track. But ultimately, you might have to say, because this opened the show, people just forgot about it very quickly. And that's why Austria ended up in mid-table instead of finishing somewhere comfortably inside the top 10. But nice to see them back in the final. Then we have Armenia, song 14. Well, I never got winner vibes from this one. And it wasn't quite like in 2017 with Artsvik, who was getting a lot of attention and people said she could challenge for the win and then she finished nowhere. But you have to say this fell short of expectations. This was Brunette with Future Lover. She was in semi-final 2, went through despite performing second with 99 points, receiving a high mark of 12 from the Georgian and Belgian public. How about that? And in the final, the juries weren't really on board with this as much as I thought they were going to be, which is a bit odd, but there we are. Really staged very nicely, that slanted podium, Brunette looking great in that white outfit, vocally very strong. Really loved what they did with the lights as well, it's worth saying. Yes, let me take a look here. 10 from the Georgian jury and the Greek jury. Is that? No, the Albanian jury, my apologies. And then with the public, a high mark of 12 from France, that would be the diaspora I suppose, and 12 from the Georgian public as well. 14th place is not bad, it's Armenia's best result for years, but you could say this deserved to do a bit better. I'm looking at Croatia, Cyprus, Lithuania, yeah, and Armenia's below them. That really does surprise me. One of my biggest growers of the year. Then we have Croatia, finishing in 13th place, 123 points. We all knew this was going to do fairly well with the public. Maybe not quite as impressively as we thought. Certainly I thought, but there we are. Obviously killed by the juries. 25th place, 11 points. But Croatia was 7th with the public, 112 points. In the first semi-final, Let 3 with Mama Shch went through in 8th place, receiving a high mark of 12 from the Serbian public. In the final, Croatia received a high mark of 8 from the Serbian jury and a high mark of 12 from the Slovenian public. This was all over the place. I know it's supposed to be satirical, but it just felt very messy, psychedelic, chaotic, bizarre, whatever other word you want to use. Obviously very striking. Yes, it lived long in the memory. Yes, it completely overshadowed the UK coming on afterwards. Credit where credit's due. It's not my least favourite song of the year anymore. But that was a very generous public mark. And, I don't know, 13th place, above Armenia, above France, above Spain, above Slovenia. Yeah, I don't know about that myself, but you know, it certainly stood out from the field, and it's Croatia's best result for a good few years. We then have Cyprus, 12th for this. A fairly ordinary song, if you ask me, but Andrew Lambrou sang well, and it was staged in an okay manner. A fairly bare stage, I have to say, but we had flames. He was in this black outfit. You had this sort of water effect on the backdrop, and then we had this sort of fiery display as well. 126 points, 13th with the juries, 11th with the public. He went through from semi-final 2 in 7th place, receiving a high mark of 12 from the Greek public, of course. In the final, the juries gave Cyprus a high mark of 10. That was from Poland. Yes, indeed. And with the public, of course, Greece gave him the maximum 12. Really don't have much to say about this. Completely forgot it was even involved. I said to my friend Peter as the recap was happening, "Oh, Cyprus are in this." I didn't mean to sound rude, but it just really didn't stand out much. 12th place, though, is a very good result. We then move on to Lithuania. Well, they're putting together a pretty decent run of results here, aren't they? This was the returning Monica with Stay, Ciutto Tutto. That really gets stuck in your head. It was a really nice performance, very simple, nothing flashy about it. She really involved her backing singers, that was nice. She was in this orange dress, and although this wasn't the song I wanted for Lithuania, certainly I can put up with it. It's a very, very nice track. She was 11th with the juries and 15th with the public. She went through semi-final 2 in 4th place, receiving a high mark of 12 from the UK, of course, and from San Marino as well, which is interesting. All 3 voters there. In the final, a high mark of 10 from the Ukrainian jury and the Australian jury, which is very interesting. As for the public, a high mark of 10 from the UK, and from Ireland, of course, and Latvia, next door neighbours. Like with Cyprus, I have very little to say about this one. It was just a very nice, gentle song performed by a very good singer. We move into the top 10. How long have I been filming for? I dread to think. I pressed the wrong button. Oh dear me. Anyway, the Czech Republic bagging a top 10 finish. Their second best result ever. Very impressive for Vesna and My Sister's Crown. 129 points. Did well with the juries. 10th place. A little disappointing with the public. 17th place. But still a top 10 result overall, which is not bad at all. In the first semi-final, went through comfortably in 4th place, receiving a high mark of 12 from the Finnish public. Very interesting. In the final, the juries gave Vesna a high mark of 12. That was from Switzerland. And the public gave Vesna a high mark of 10. And that was from Finland. Yes, Finland really liked the Czechia entry, which is interesting. I thought this was staged in a pretty good manner. Very powerful. Quite casual outfits, all about the long hair really, and the hands that you could see on the backdrop, and that one LED screen that had been pushed forwards. Certainly, I said it all along, this needed a bigger stage. The Czech national final was nothing really that special, but in Liverpool it really came alive, and I think they saved their best performance for last, and I think they can feel very, very proud of their performance. We move on to 9th place for Australia. Really great to see, and hopefully the EBU will be renewing that contract for Australia. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't. Voyager with Promise won semi-final 2 with 149 points, receiving plenty of 12s. In the final, the juries gave Australia a high mark of 12. That was the Portuguese jury and the Icelandic jury. Lovely to see that rock is still alive in those countries. As for the public, a measly 21 points. The crowd loved this in the Eurovision village. Peter was saying that was a mega performance. He really enjoyed it too. A high mark for Australia of 8 from Finland. So there you go. 6th with the juries, very, very good. 20th with the public. This was great. Pyro, the car, lead singer are having a great time. Great camera angles, great energy, really fierce. Not much more to say about it. Absolutely one of my favourite songs of the year. We then have Estonia, the result of the year. More people need to be talking about this because Estonia only just qualified in 10th place from semi-final 2, which once semi-final 2 was over and done with, I saw a lot of people saying, oh, Estonia probably only just qualified. That's sort of what happened. But still, quite a gap between Alika and Dilyau. 74 points for this. Bridges is such a wonderful song. She received a high mark of 10 from the San Marino public and Lithuanian public. Votes from every country, including the rest of the world. In the final, 5th with the juries. Absolutely fantastic. 146 points and a high mark of 12 from the Latvian jury, and a high mark of 6 from the Finnish public and the Latvian public. Have I got that right? Yes, I have. Really wonderful song, staged in a very nice manner. Alika sounding great in that blue dress, looking fabulous. And I'm really, really glad to see Estonia back in the top 10. Yes, she absolutely benefited from a high jury mark. But this was a really, really wonderful performance. And she did get a big cheer, I thought, in the Eurovision village, absolutely. A bigger cheer than I expected, but there we are. 8th place, really good. Then we have Belgium. The dark horse of the year came galloping in. To think that this was so unpopular when the Belgian national final took place, but he's ended up finishing 7th in the Eurovision final. Fair play, credit where credit's due for Gustav, and because of you, he went through from semi-final 2 in 8th place, receiving a high mark of 12 from the Austrian public, and in the final, the juries really liked him. Dished out a couple of 12s. 3 times he received 12 points from the juries. As for the public, he received a high mark of 7. No, he didn't. He received a high mark of 10 from the Dutch public. This was really good. And this was one of those performances where actually having your face on the LED screens didn't look awkward or clumsy. It sort of worked here. It sort of made the whole performance quite classy. And this dance pop style that he was going for, it's sort of timeless. You play this sort of music, even if it feels a bit 90s, very throwback, maybe a tad on the dated side, people will get up and dance, they'll have a good time. It does have this timeless quality to it. And I like this song a lot more than I did a couple of weeks ago. I'm not sure it's a personal qualifier of mine from semi-final 2, I will say that much, but he always sounded good live, and he was having a really good time with his dancers, and 7th place for Belgium is pretty darn good. 6th place for Ukraine. This was Tvorchi with Heart of Steel, the reigning champions coming into last weekend's show. 15th with the juries and 4th with the public. And Tvorchi received a high mark of 12 from the Czechia jury and a high mark of 12 from a couple of nations in the public half of the results. The performance was fine. It was actually quite innovative, quite cool to watch. I liked the colours, mainly blue and yellow. The vocals could have been a tiny bit better, but that's by and by. Yeah, I don't have much to say about this. It's another very good result for Ukraine this year, and they'll be looking to win again very, very soon. Of course, the last time the contest was in Sweden, Ukraine won. Could it happen again in 2024? We wait and see. I've never loved this song, but it was staged quite well, and certainly a lot better than how I perceived it at Vidbeer. Then we have Norway, 5th place. Alessandra is absolutely one of my favourite musicians of the year, if not my favourite musician. I've been following her vlogs on YouTube and her other social media pages. Her personality is great. I mean, it's exactly my cup of tea. She's so lovely, so lively. What a great song this was. People loved it right away, really, as soon as she performed it at MGP. Her outfit changed for Eurovision. The staging was a tiny bit different, but not a million miles away from what we were already familiar with. Her semi-final performance, she opened semi-final 1, looked a bit nervous, didn't really seem to be completely comfortable on stage. And she went through from semi-final 1 in 6th place, which is maybe a little low, but there we are. She received a high mark of 10 from Israel, Czechia, Finland and Italy, but nothing from the rest of the world. And then in the final, she was 17th with the juries. That's a bit harsh. 3rd with the public. That's a bit more like it. She received a high mark of 10 from the Danish and Israeli juries, and a high mark of 12 from the Finnish public, which is lovely to see. The only country that gave her nothing in the public half of the results in the final was Lithuania. But there you are. Alessandra, absolutely fantastic. Great, feel-good, fierce, bouncy song. You can just get swept up in the melody of it. And I'm really, really thrilled that she finished in the top 5 after a pretty poor jury mark. Then we have Italy. Well, Italy just going about their business every year. And this song, people sort of brushed to one side a little bit. But look, it was performed quite well, very simple staging. Marco just stood there, smoke all around him if I recall. You had 2 dancers and you had these steps at the back of the stage, and they were jumping off and then bouncing back up again. It wasn't too much of a distraction like I thought it was going to be. Vocally, he was very good. He was very emotional as well. You could really see that at the end of the performance. And I said to my friend Peter, a job well done, absolutely. Third with the juries, sixth with the public. He received a high mark of 12 from loads of different countries in the jury half of the results, and a high mark of 12 from the Maltese public and the Albanian public. Really don't have much more to say about it. For a country that maybe doesn't love Eurovision quite as much as a few other nations across the continent, Italy sure do know what they're doing when it comes to the ESC, and I wouldn't be surprised if Italy win again in the next few years. Then we have Israel, third place, for the second year in a row, a female-driven pop bop with a dance break, finishes in the top 3, and second with the juries. That was really, really impressive. I suppose, putting the vocals to one side, they were okay, I suppose. I'm not a professional singer. They sounded okay to me. But I think the juries were just bowled over by the stage show. This really looked very slick and very professional. You had the light-up box, Noah looking absolutely incredible, and then you had the dance break, and that was really, really well choreographed. It really, really stood out. It was quite the spectacle. The public thought so too. Fifth place, 185 points from the public, 177 from the juries, 362 in total. In the first semi-final, Israel finished third, receiving a high mark of 12 from lots of different places, including the rest of the world. In the final, she received 12s from loads of juries, and with the public received a high mark of 12 from the rest of the world again, and a few other nations. Yeah, really, really good. I mean, Rylan and Scott Mills, the commentary team for the UK in the semi-final, said she looks like a pop star, she is a pop star, and she is a really, really famous musician, despite being so young. Third place at Eurovision can now be added to her CV. Very, very impressive. As for Finland, the runners-up, what a shame. My God, this went off in the Eurovision village. And in the arena, you could hear people chanting for Kari. I've never heard that before. A whole arena, pretty much, gunning for this one person to do the business. Absolutely fantastic. This was so good. Okay, vocally, he could have been a bit stronger, but he was moving about the stage, dashing about. Vocals with a song like this don't really matter anyway. It's more of a chant than anything else. You had the wooden box. You had his dancers with the manic grins on their faces. He had the luminous green bolero jacket and the tight trousers. I mean, it was just fabulous. My brother really liked this song. Peter really liked this song. Everybody seemed to love this. Absolutely smashed the public half of the results. 376 is a huge score. And he was fourth with the juries, which wasn't that bad. But because Sweden was so far in front, the damage was done. He won semi-final 1, loads of 12 points. In the final, he received 12 points from the Norwegian and Swedish juries, and from the public, 12s all over the place. The lowest mark he got was 6 from a few different countries. So there you are. He absolutely smashed it. The crowd really wanted him to win, and to be honest, I think a lot of the other participants wanted him to win as well. Nevertheless, second place is not to be sniffed at. I know a lot of people are very disappointed about this, including Karja himself, but he should feel very proud of his achievements. The second best result ever for Finland, the best Finnish language result for a song at Eurovision as well. Fantastic, something really different, and my winner of the year. Nothing else to say. Sweden won instead. Well, there's a surprise. 583 points, so not by a huge margin, but still comfortable enough. She won the jury vote easily, absolutely by a mile. 340 points there. Second with the public. Look, the public can complain all they like, but they still had Loreen, the eventual winner, in second place. So come on, 243 points there. She was second in semi-final 1, receiving 12 points from the Maltese public and the Dutch public. And in the final, loads of 12s from the juries, a low mark of 4 from Georgia and San Marino, but there we are. As for the public, not a single set of 12 to be seen anywhere, and Finland, how about that, blanked her completely. Very tactical, if you ask me. But you know, this was a good performance. Smoke, very dramatic, very similar to how it was at Melfest, vocally pretty strong. She really, really wanted this. And what surprised me so much is how, when they spoke to her in the green room, she was saying how she just couldn't believe that people loved her song so much. And I thought, hang on a minute, you've been the favourite for months. You must have seen this coming. You must have seen this coming. The songwriting team around her all looked very relaxed, as if they knew they had victory in the bag. Thomas Gierson sat there with the most smug look on his face for the entire show. I bet you £1,000,000 he was sitting there thinking, yep, won in 2012, winning again. It's an absolute shoo-in. He really did look ultra confident, in my opinion. And fair play, she becomes the first woman to win twice. She's really likeable, she's very down to earth. She's obviously a huge, huge Eurovision star, even before this year's contest. And I think the disappointment, and there was a sense of disappointment, clearly in the arena, watching it in the Eurovision Village, and indeed in the Eurovision Village, there was a groan with every 12 points that she received. You know, it just felt as though this year's contest was always likely to go Sweden's way because of who the singer was. And would this song have won had it been performed by somebody else and staged in the same way? Yeah, probably. It probably would have done. But Loreen just had that little bit of star quality anyway, and that's probably what helped her in the end. I don't know. You could debate this for weeks to come, but what's done is done. We know for sure next year, on the 50th anniversary of ABBA's victory, how about that? The contest will be in Sweden. It's going to be a very, very good show. It could be Stockholm, possibly Gothenburg, or maybe it will be somewhere it's never been before, and we'll keep up this streak of non-capital cities hosting Eurovision. Don't have anything else to say about it. I'm not mad about the winner, but there really was a sense of disappointment, which is still lingering a few days later, that there was an opportunity for something different to win, but instead we've got something not a million miles away from what we had in 2012 coming out on top again. Anyway, that's it. I have nothing else to say. The stage was good, the hosts were fine, Graham Norton made some very funny comments, and obviously did the commentary alongside Mel Giedroyc for the UK as well. The interval acts, don't really remember much about the semi-final interval acts, to be honest with you. Rita Ora, I barely remember. Sam Ryder, his song was very good, and obviously the drummer from Queen was on stage as well. That was fantastic. The flag parade, that wasn't bad. As for the Liverpool songbook, that was really good. Netta performed You Spin Me Round Like a Record. I've no idea what she was wearing, but there we are. Sonia, she sounded pretty good, 30 years on, fantastic. Mahmood performed Imagine, that was nice. Duncan Lawrence, You'll Never Walk Alone. That went down like a storm, absolutely. People loved that. That's such a big song, especially in Liverpool. And I thought that was a really, really emotionally charged moment. Cornelia Jacobs, my winner last year, performed I Turn to You, which I actually found to be a bit boring, but there we are. And then we had Daddy Frère finally performing live at Eurovision with a great cover of Hole Again, which is not a song that I really love, but his version of it, and there is a full version online, really, really fantastic. Anyway, that is it. 1 hour and 2 minutes long. I've got nothing else to say. I'm sure I've forgotten things, but that's my long rambling review of the contest. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Thank you for all of the support lately. My God, I need a cup of tea. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Sorry if there was any lag, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now. Roll on, Eurovision 2024.